You know what you're listening to?
Is that a trick question?
It's the I Still Love This Game podcast with your host, Matthew Damian.
He's an idiot. Don't listen to this. He's an idiot.
Hello and welcome to the I Still Love This Game podcast. Now, I know it's been a while since I've done my last episode, but can you really blame me? I mean, it's been the off season and not much has happened. My goodness. It feels like this is the off-season that will not stop giving. And I keep thinking to myself, well, I want to do a recap. And then Kevin Durant and Kyrie Irving go to the Nets. And then I'm thinking, well, I still want to wait and see where Kawhi Leonard goes. And then Kawhi Leonard and Paul George somehow end up on the Clippers. Then I'm thinking, well, what's going to happen with Russell Westbrook? Because at the start of the off-season, we never thought that was going to be an option. And then it became inevitable. And of course, now we've got the news of Russell Westbrook being traded to the Houston Rockets. My oh my. My oh my. How many draft picks, by the way, does Oklahoma have now? There has to be some kind of record for upcoming drafts for first round picks that they have. And they were able to swap him for Chris Paul and get, oh my goodness. I'm not sure if I like it or not, but the amount of draft picks they've got is impressive. And Sam Presti, for the most part, knows how to draft. This is, and they may not have finished with their trades as well. They still have a lot of talent that contenders would be very interested in. But I'm not going to get ahead of myself. I want to talk about Russell Westbrook, and I want to talk about him now being on the Houston Rockets. Now, conventional wisdom would be telling us that Westbrook would not fit in with a James Harden and the rest of the players on the Houston Rockets. And the reason you could simply point is, well, look at Kevin Durant. Those two, they were successful in getting to the finals. They were contenders when they were both healthy, but they never won a championship. And you could also say that they, considering their talent, that they underachieved. And you would not get any argument from me. But what I will say is James Harden's a different beast. And the Houston Rockets play very small. Look at how PJ Tucker, who's 6'5", 6'6", he's big. Like he's a wide 6'5" or 6'6". But he plays the 4 a lot of the times. Russell Westbrook is 6'3", very athletic, plays bigger than what he is. He's not afraid to protect the rim and get rebounds and push it. This might be ideal. Absolutely ideal. You give him the opportunities to create in the open court after getting the rebound and pushing it. And then if that doesn't work, allow James Harden to operate in the half court as the primary weapon. And that's a scary situation if you try and defend that. Now, Paul George is another player that you could say underachieved, even though he had a hell of a season last year. But in terms of team results, they definitely underachieved, playing alongside Russell Westbrook. But James Harden is a lot more consistent offensively than what Paul George is. Paul George could explode at any moment. Don't get me wrong; he's wonderful offensively, but he's not on the same level as what James Harden is as scoring the basketball. Defensively, probably elevates him maybe even higher overall than James Harden, but I'm just talking about offensively. So you've got a couple of things that you need to take into account here as to why this is going to be successful. The other thing, if you're looking at this from the Rockets, they were almost dead in the water. I laughed when somebody asked me this, who are you going to trade him for? And John Wall? I mean, that might have been the only situation. Now, John Wall or Russell Westbrook, I mean, I'm taking Russell Westbrook every single day of the week and twice on Sunday. And they were able to get him, and that rejuvenates this Rockets team, and they can do a lot more now. Chris Paul was clearly on the decline. He was no longer the leader that he was obviously on the Clippers or even on the Pelicans when they were in New Orleans. But now you've got a situation where you've got a guy like Russell Westbrook who can do a lot of things that Chris Paul couldn't do. Now, what may have happened with Chris Paul and James Harden is they were getting in each other's way because they did a lot of things similarly. They needed the ball in their hands a lot. Now, Russell Westbrook, he needs the ball in his hands a lot to be effective as well. But the question in all this is, will he be able... First of all, would the Rockets system require him to take the ball out of his hands a little bit more, or will that actually allow both of those guys to get as many touches as they used to, obviously James Harden? And if the answer is no, will Russell Westbrook would be willing to take a back seat in the half court and allow James Harden to do what he's been so effective in doing in the last 4 or 5 years? It's going to be really interesting to watch. And this might be the most interesting team in the Western Conference, and that's saying something. Because obviously, I alluded to it before. I haven't talked about it yet, so I may as well get it out of the way now. And the Kawhi Leonard, Paul George. I mean, who saw that coming? I remember when waiting to see what was going to happen, and I was just expecting a Kawhi Leonard signing. Honestly, I expected it to be with the Lakers. All season long, I've been saying it was going to be the Clippers, but it looked like everything was leaning towards the Lakers in the offseason. And then when he was meant to, I think it was a Thursday, wasn't it? It was around the 4th of July weekend. He was meant to make a decision. Actually, no, I think it was a Friday. Excuse me, it was on the 5th. And then he stalled a little bit. And then 2 or 3 in the morning, he announced what was going on. Now, what I think happened, he was probably going to go to the Lakers. And then the Clippers were like, just hold on, we've got something big happening. And that's when they pulled the trigger on that trade to bring in Paul George. And that's when Kawhi Leonard changed his mind. That is my personal opinion as to what happened. The other thing that could have possibly happened was Kawhi Leonard was just playing possum the whole time. And he was just scoping out to see what the Lakers were doing internally and where they were going, what their strategy was, and how they were planning to move forward with him. That's another possibility. You never know. You really never know in these situations. But the Clippers, Jesus Christ, my goodness, you maybe have the potential for the best perimeter defensive team since the 2004 Pistons, when you look at it. Because you've got Kawhi Leonard, obviously a once-in-a-generation defender. Paul George, top 2 or 3 defensive players, at least on the perimeter, top 5 clearly overall defensive players in the NBA right now. Very, very good. And he deserved a lot. He got a lot of legitimate praise and consideration for Defensive Player of the Year this year. And then you throw in a guy like Patrick Beverley, and that's who Patrick Beverley is. He is known for his defense. And on top of all of that, you have Doc Rivers as the coach. And Doc Rivers, I don't care what anyone says, he is in his prime coaching right now. The last 2 seasons have been his best jobs so far. And that's saying a lot because the man has won a championship. But what he has done with such limited talent, and now you're going to give him all this talent? And yeah, I know they gave up a lot to get Paul George, but the amount of draft picks, look, the NBA is not the NFL. First round picks only matter really if you're a top 5. And even then, some years that doesn't even matter. You can get lucky in the later rounds, but it's nothing to build a franchise around. If you're consistently getting in between 13 to non-lottery picks, I should say, it means nothing. There's really no trade value to it. And unless even if you want an example, think of trust the process and all that nonsense. It took them, 5 years of tanking to get 2 All-Stars. And really, one of those All-Stars, Ben Simmons, is deeply flawed as it is. I thought with Russell Westbrook, that would have been a hell of a trade to pull that one off if you were able to trade him to Philly for Ben Simmons. That would have been a wonderful trade for both teams. But that didn't happen, unfortunately. But, who would say no in that situation? Clearly not Oklahoma. But would Philly say no to Russell Westbrook? I don't think they would. I think that would have shot them, especially with Toronto being dismembered and Kawhi Leonard leaving. But that would have shot Philly right to the top as being the favorites of that conference. But in terms of teams just catapulting their way to the top, you've got to say the Clippers are the contenders, especially with what we just saw Kawhi Leonard do in the Eastern Conference. and the NBA Finals. So just the NBA playoffs in general. But unbelievable stuff. And I haven't even really got to the guts of what else has happened. I mean, you also had Kyrie Irving go to the Nets and Kevin Durant go there. Everyone, like, it's such a shame that injury happened for Kevin Durant, because if Kevin Durant was healthy leading into this season, the NBA landscape would be so dramatically different. As it is right now, who the hell knows? We've never seen a player recover from an Achilles injury and be the same player. Think of it. Think Isaiah Thomas, think Kobe Bryant. You think all these guys, they were never the same. DeMarcus Cousins, never the same. Now, Kevin Durant's game is not based off athleticism. It's mainly based off skills, but the athleticism absolutely complements those skills. So that is pretty much gone at this stage, and we don't know what we're going to see. And everyone's saying that the Knicks lost out on that. Maybe they didn't. Maybe they dodged a bullet. Maybe they were the ones that pulled out. They were like, we can't trust this. And they didn't pursue it any further. And if that meant them not getting Kyrie Irving as well, then so be it. So kudos to them if they actually did that, because I can understand that completely. And then you've got to look at what the Celtics did. You know, obviously they lost Al Horford, which is huge. But they were able to replace Kyrie Irving with Kemba Walker. This is a better fit. I think Kemba Walker is a better player than what Kyrie Irving is. And what I mean by that, people are going to be like, what the hell are you smoking, man? And believe me, you'd like to know. But when you think about it, what happened with Terry Rozier when the Celtics, when he was on the Celtics? They made the conference finals. They were within one game of the finals. And I get it. The East was a little bit weaker that year, or a lot weaker that year. And then with Kyrie Irving, let's forget about the fact that they only made it to the second round and only won one game in the second round. Let's look at how badly they were playing during the regular season. And compare that to the playoff run where Terry Rozier was their starting point guard. And the way I'm looking at it is Terry Rozier, Kemba Walker plays a much more similar style to Terry Rozier than he does to, say, a Kyrie Irving. And this will allow Jaylen Brown and Tatum to really expand their games and be more featured in that offense in a similar way to that playoff run. Now, they're a little bit more mature, and that is clearly their future. I totally get it. So I'm looking at the Kemba Walker. Kemba Walker is an upgrade over Kyrie Irving for that team. Now, individually, no, Kyrie Irving's better than Kemba Walker, yes. But it's not by much. If you've watched basketball, you know that Kemba Walker is a hell of a talent. But in terms of how they fit, it was obvious that Kyrie Irving did not fit into that team, whereas I think Kemba Walker will. Now, of course, Al Horford going to Philly, that changes everything. So clearly the Celtics aren't as good as what they were last year, but then but when you talk about the comparison between Walker and Irving, I'd take Walker any day of the week. Hell, I would take Terry Rozier any day of the week over Kyrie Irving. And that's just based off results and the eye test as well. When you see those two, how those two teams played when Irving was the starting point guard as opposed to Terry Rozier. This now leads me into Al Horford and going to the Philadelphia 76ers. Now, a lot of people disrespect Al Horford. People who watch and understand the game, they know the value of an Al Horford. And he's more of a point guard than he is a center, the way that he plays on offense. This will allow Joel Embiid to go back into the post. And this is a big thing because Ben Simmons cannot play on the perimeter as a point guard. He cannot shoot. Now, Joel Embiid, a lot of the times, was starting behind the three-point line because of that. Now, with Al Horford, you can now essentially isolate those two, and they can run the offense. And Embiid can get the dominant space on the court without being double-teamed immediately as soon as he puts the ball on the floor or he touches the ball. So this is significant. I think Philadelphia is the team to beat in the Eastern Conference with with Toronto, as I said, going by the wayside, and that's even without the trade for Russell Westbrook. I'm surprised that they did not move, or at least attempt, as far as we know, Ben Simmons for Russell Westbrook. That is surprising to me, because that would have made sense on so many levels. But they didn't, but I still think they're the favorites. Milwaukee's up there too, don't get me wrong, but Milwaukee was exposed big time in their inability to counter, and more specifically, Giannis's inability to counter. You take him, if you are able to force him into shooting jumpers, he is not very effective. He is very, very limited in those situations. And that's really what turned that series on the head against the Toronto Raptors. And then, I'm probably missing a whole bunch of things that have happened. And then on top of that, you had Terry Rozier go to the Hornets. More importantly, Tony Parker retiring. And Tony Parker retiring, look, I hate to say it, because the Hall of Fame means nothing to me until Ben Wallace gets in. But Tony Parker will absolutely get into the Hall of Fame, deservedly so. He's won, 4 championships, a finals MVP, huge ambassador of the game of basketball to France, even though he's from Belgium. Wonderful, wonderful career, and it should be celebrated. However, it's a footnote to this offseason, and the other team that we should be talking about is the Golden State Warriors. And they offered Klay Thompson the max, as they should have. He accepted the max. It's going to be very interesting to see how they rebuild. First of all, I got no sympathy for them. You still have Draymond Green, you still have Klay Thompson, you still have Steph Curry. But it'll be very interesting, one, to see how they try to survive without Klay Thompson and without Kevin Durant. That's going to be something that I'm going to keep an eye on. And we're going to see Steph Curry. This is maybe the best thing that will happen for Steph Curry's career. And allow me to explain this. So obviously they won in 2015. They kind of lucked their way into that because of all the injuries. 2016, they ran through the league, only lost 9 games. That's an NBA record. But they lost in the NBA Finals. They were exposed pretty big by the Durant and Westbrook-led Thunder as well. They were so lucky to escape with their lives there, but they did. Kudos to them for that. But then Kevin Durant joined them. So we never really saw the redemption for Steph Curry after the 2016 Finals. And we never really were going to see it whilst Kevin Durant was... We had the potential of seeing it this year in the Finals, but we never saw it. And we saw what happened this year. I mean, obviously a big performance in Game 3 of the Finals, but that was in a losing effort. And now we're going to see an opportunity for Steph Curry to redeem himself. And the rest of the Warriors too, for what happened. Now, it wasn't just Kevin Durant leaving as well. Iguodala in a trade, that hurts him a lot too. He was invaluable at times for them. The dude has more finals MVPs than what Steph Curry does. That gives you an indication. I'm not saying he's a better player or he's more valuable throughout this run of 3 championships for Golden State. But in 2015, he was the finals MVP. It wasn't Steph Curry. So he was always their backup plan. Whenever they needed some energy or a defensive stop or a defensive presence or someone to make shots or someone to make plays, he was the guy that was more times than not who was willing to step up. So it's going to be very interesting to see how the Warriors respond in all of this. And the league is different. The league is totally different now. I remember writing an article about the 1998 Game 6 of the Finals. And I said, after Jordan shot, it felt like it was Armageddon for the NBA. And people didn't really understand that. But what I was talking about is the league wasn't the same afterwards. It was such an emphatic end to not just Jordan, but then of course you had the lockout, and you had a crazy free agency period, and then you saw the emergence of Tim Duncan, and then the next season the emergence of Kobe Bryant and Shaq. And those 2 teams dominated the league, with the exception of the 2004 Pistons and the 2006 Miami Heat teams. Those 2 teams won every single title from 1999 all the way up to 2010. So that's an incredible run. Oh, of course, the Boston Celtics too, in 2008. But outside of that, that's an incredible run. And that was really the emergence. So the league was never the same. And after this off-season period, the league's not going to be the same. This is a totally different league. And if you don't believe me, I tell you what. In 6 months, load up NBA 2K18 or 2K19 even with the default rosters and try to get your head around some of these players and the positions they're going to be in and the teams they're in. This landscape has changed so significantly. Whether it's for the better or not, I don't know. We will see. But it's what's concerning to me, though, is the NBA generates a lot more interest amongst fans during the off-season than it does during the playoffs. And if the league wants to survive, they've got to fix that. And that hopefully it will now, because I think a lot the competitive balance has sort of started up again. But I think the East is significantly weaker than it was last year. I was starting to really enjoy. I enjoyed the Eastern Conference playoffs a lot more than I did the Western Conference playoffs. So it's kind of disappointing that we're seeing those teams take a step backwards. The Celtics taking a step backwards. Philadelphia, taking a step forward, but not enough to carry the burden or to be, in my opinion, genuine contenders with some of the big players out west. And of course the Raptors also not they're not the same either, with Kawhi Leonard leaving. So that's the disappointing parts of it. But this feels like a new era, and that's what I meant by the Armageddon. So it's a new era being born in the NBA. It's going to be interesting to see how this all plays out. But hopefully when I say hopefully, I'm kind of burnt out from the NBA right now. I'm enjoying baseball way too much. And but it's gotten to the point now that I want the NBA to slow down so everyone can breathe. Everyone can take a little bit of a break from it. I hate this year-round nonsense. There's an off-season, so the fans should be able to take an off-season too, because otherwise fans burn out in the playoffs and the interest drops. Let's take our break now from it, our sabbatical now from it, and let's come back when it's opening tip-off in the middle of October, and we'll be fresh. And that's not to say this podcast will start back up then. We'll have some historical content, but hopefully the NBA landscape won't be seeing too many more major moves from now up until the start of until the tip-off. But guys, I've spoken for 23 minutes straight. I'm going to let it go now. I have to do a call-in show with one of my good friends. And yes, thanks for listening. And I'll speak to you guys. I don't know when the next episode will be up. Just stay tuned. Hopefully next week. And I love you all. See you later.